Okay. All right, guys. So welcome to Psych 294 in this summer 6-week term. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Christina Roylance, and I'm going to be your instructor for this online curriculum. Most of you know me already, so I'm not going to go through too much to introduce myself since most of you do know me. If anyone is curious how I've been spending time in quarantine, I watch Star Trek and play Animal Crossing. And if you want to bitch about Animal Crossing, I would love to talk about it. If you want me to help you get some hybrid flowers, I have a gold watering can. I'll come to your island. It's cool. Other than that, again, since most of you have taken 293 with me, we can pretty much just roll right into talking about the class, which shouldn't take us forever because, again, most of you have taken 293 with me, and so you're well familiar with the structure of the classes that I create. And 294 is going to be definitely based off 293, but obviously the content is a little bit different. And it's a little bit easier. So I know a lot of you were not the most confident doing math in 293, and it seems like, in my experience, a lot of students really are able to push past that, but still, it's more fun to not have to do math problems. So this is going to be a similar experience to 293, but maybe just a little bit more fun and easy. So we love that. Okay, so like I said, anyone who's taken 293 with me, you're probably well familiar with the structure of my syllabus. It's got all the details. I probably have the longest syllabus of anyone, but I like to be thorough. So your textbook for this semester is going to be the Morling Research Methods in Psychology. Hopefully most of you have gotten a chance to acquire the text. Old, cheaper editions that you find on Amazon, online versions, it's all good. Any sort of fancy add-ons that might be in the newest edition, I never bother with any of that. So whatever you can get your hands on the cheapest and the most efficiently. You can purchase the APA manual if you want. We are going to be talking about APA formatting a little bit more this semester than in 293. Honestly, it's not bad to have, but it's not super critical. I'm going to give you all the instruction that you really need in APA. And honestly, APA is such a pain in the ass. They came out with the 7th edition this past year, and all the rules are different. So we are going to try and cover that, but it's nitpicky, it's minutia. You can find all that formatting, the rules and guidelines online. So if you want to have a physical copy, you can. We are going to be using SPSS this semester, not as much as in 293, because we're not really learning about a lot of new analyses. You basically learned all the analyses that we're going to be doing in 293, but we are going to be using SPSS to analyze our data at the end of the semester. So figuring out how to get SPSS working remotely, if you haven't already, can be kind of a process, but I'm happy to help once we get to that point in the semester. I like assignments to be submitted in Microsoft Office, just in a Word doc. And obviously this is an online curriculum, so if you don't have a computer, that's going to be kind of tricky. I don't even know how you would be aware that the class has started. But if you're experiencing difficulty accessing a computer and the internet reliably, feel free to be in touch with me because I know there's ways that we can get you a laptop through the department. So then course description, course objectives, right? It's worth your time to read through this information, but basically this is the research methods and writing sort of sibling to 293. So both 293 and 294 are meant to give you a good, solid working understanding of psychological science through the analyses that we use and the research methods that we use. So more of a focus on research design and scientific communication. This is a writing focused class, so there is more of a writing component than 293. If you ever took 293 with me, you did write a final paper. Think of it as that final paper, except you just have to write a literature review along with it. So a little bit more time spent on writing as opposed to learning analysis after analysis. More information about how this online format's going to work. I just got done with an online 293 curriculum, and I really just used the same structure for this language for 294 because it seemed to work pretty well. I liked leaning on a mix of pre-recorded lecture materials and some live Zoom meetings whenever there's like a more applied, like lab activity or a research project component. So whenever I have quote unquote lecture content, the vast majority of the time, I'm just going to create a pre-recorded version for you and post a YouTube link. That's the easiest way I find to post videos. And I tend to get those posted sometime in the afternoon, whatever the indicated day is on the calendar. Whenever there are remote meetings, I'll typically have them at some point in the afternoon. I was holding Zoom meetings for 293 kind of regularly at noon Eastern Standard Time, which I know doesn't work for everyone, and I don't expect that to work for everyone. So if you can attend anytime I have a remote meeting, it doesn't hurt. But if you can't make it, I will likely record the content of that Zoom meeting and post it later. But it's always a good idea to log on if you can, because then you're able to ask me any questions and have a check-in with me if you want to get that out of the way. So again, the structure of assessment for this class is very similar to 293. A lot of it will be this research project, which I'll be discussing more in depth a little bit later this week, but I will spend a little bit of time talking about it today once I'm done working through the syllabus. Again, if you've taken 293 with me, you're familiar with the structure of how it's graded, things like the group work that you do along the way, creating your survey and analyzing your data, you get credit for that. In this case, since it is a more writing-focused class, there will be a mid-semester draft as well as the final paper. The mid-semester draft is never particularly harshly. It's mostly meant to kind of allow me to give you feedback, but in this case, you will be turning in a mid-semester draft to get you towards that writing component. And then there will be presentations towards the end of the semester. So if you've done presentations with me, you're largely familiar with that, but we'll discuss any differences to how the presentation will work once we get a little bit further along the semester. Your traditional assessment components of exams and quizzes, there are only 2 exams. I decided that the content for research methods is a little bit more manageable to accomplish across 2 exams versus 293. There's just a lot more tricky content, so having only 2 exams would have those exams just be monsters. For research methods, I think the amount of content is a little bit more manageable, and so there's just going to be 2 exams, one halfway through the semester and one at the end. And then there's no more SPSS lab quizzes because we don't need to do that. But there will be some lecture quizzes throughout the semester, like 5, not very many. And then some miscellaneous, unless you took 293 with me over the summer. This is slightly new for the online version of this class, but lecture discussions. If you took a class in person with me, you know that I love to have these discussion slides where I have people get into small groups and chat, and then at the end I ask groups to tell me sort of what you discussed. There's no easy way to do that in the online format. Of course, we could have Zoom meetings, and I would love to do that, but there's just no time that I know everyone in the class would be able to meet. It would just be impossible. You know, there's people who are in China who are experiencing a pretty large time difference from any of us who are still in Ohio. So it just didn't seem to work to try and have these Zoom meetings. So the discussions are just going to be Canvas-based discussion boards. Lab activities, these are just going to be like worksheets. There's only going to be a handful throughout the semester. And then these weekly check-ins, which again is a little bit new. Basically, this is just checking in with me at any point throughout the week. Chatting with me about what's going on with your project, talking about my feedback for your project and moving that forward. There's sort of a different focus for each week. So this week, it's really just getting started on things, which is why I'm giving all of you check-in credits just for being here. But in future weeks, just attending a class-wide remote Zoom doesn't really work because it's sort of personalized to wherever you're at in your project. So to get a weekly check-in with me, you really just have to arrange a Zoom with me. Just be in touch with me over email, ask for a meeting time. The amount of time we spend checking in will depend. If it's sort of like everything is smooth sailing in your project, we can mostly just have a quick hi and bye. But if it's like a data analysis week, that's obviously a little bit more intense. So it'll sort of depend week to week what we're going to talk about in the check-in. But just be in touch with me. We'll be able to find a time. I'm always happy to meet with people after work hours, on the weekends. What else am I doing? Let's be honest. If you have any concerns about when you'll be able to check in with me because you don't have time during my office hours, just be in touch with me. Again, I will meet with you whenever. Maybe not at like 2 a.m. I'm not down with that. my extended diatribe on academic integrity that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Read through it, love it, take it to heart, don't plagiarize. It breaks my heart and it makes all of our lives a lot harder. Proctorio will be in effect, which now, given that we've been in this online lifestyle for a few months now, I'm sure you've all had some experience with Proctorio. I use Proctorio for the exams. So just make sure that you know how to use Proctorio, take a practice quiz, make sure your Google Chrome is working, this, that, and the other. Miscellaneous policies that I always include, which again, if you've ever read my syllabus, this is all the same kind of stuff because I have the same sort of miscellaneous policies time and time again. This is a little bit different. I'm being super slap happy with the extensions these days. Honestly, it's no longer the hill I'm willing to die on. Honestly, this is a hard way to take a class, you know, an accelerated 6-week version, completely online. So in the past, I used to try and be, you know, not completely willy-nilly with extensions because I, you know, didn't want to appear like completely soft or like a pushover. Again, not the hill I'm willing to die on anymore. If you want an extension, just ask me. Pretty much anything, any assignment, I really don't care at this point. As long as you try and get it to me and work with me and you ask for an extension, you know, it's fine, literally anything. Try and have a good attitude. Why not? Life's not that bad. We're all alive, right? If we're lucky. Roadmap, like what are the goals for the project week to week? So this gives you a sort of a general idea of what we're looking at. And then the classic calendar. So I do know that some people are not in Eastern Standard Time, which is the time zone for Ohio as well as the East Coast in the United States, but I know not everyone is here in Ohio or on the East Coast. So I set every assignment in this class to be due at 11:59 p.m. my time. So if you're not in Ohio time, just make sure to convert 11:59 EST to whatever time zone you're working in to get a sense of when something is due. So then, as usual, my calendar is set up to let you know what the topic of the day is, relevant readings, as well as anything that may be due. You'll notice that your first lecture quiz is coming up tomorrow. Don't worry, that is not actual, real, legit content. This is just some information that I need to go forward. So basically, it's going to be a few questions about how you'd like to approach your project this semester, as well as times to meet that work for you. Just in case there's like more of a consensus that evenings work better for Zooms. You know, I can have my regular Zooms whenever I have them in the evening. Again, noons seem to work for the most people, and it works for me. But if there's like some other time that magically works better for a lot of people, I'm willing to do that. And then this is really important to take this quiz because you have some options for the project this semester that you did not have in old versions of 293. For example, should you choose, you can do the project by yourself. I know a lot of people throughout the years like have told me they hate group work and they end up being the person who does everything by themselves, and that's obviously a negative experience, and I want you guys to have a little bit more agency here. So particularly since it's hard to coordinate when we don't have face-to-face specific class meeting times, if you feel like your schedule is crazy and you don't want to go through the hassle of having to coordinate with group mates, you can do the presentation, the paper, the project, everything start to finish by yourself if you choose to do so. Or I can randomly place you in a group, or I can put you in a group based on similar interests. So just make sure to take this quiz because that'll give me the information I need to structure the class going forward regarding group formation for projects, as well as generally amenable meeting times. So then, you know, something like the lab activity that we're going to be doing on Thursday, right? Like I'll probably hold a Zoom for that just to walk you through that. But if you want to just do that independently without coming to the meeting, it should not be impossible to do so. Then this is just randomly a little bit different. You'll get lab activity credit for submitting your city training, which I'm guessing the vast majority of you have already done because you've all made it past 293. So I just need that on record because you need that in order to do any form of research. So if you've already done city training, just submit that completion certificate and you'll get more credit for it. Discussion boards, lecture quizzes, any important project steps are bolded just so you know it's important. But other than that, just peruse the calendar and the syllabus at your leisure. At this point, I'll ask if anybody has any questions on the syllabus, and then I'll just spend a couple minutes telling you about the projects, just a few basics. We'll talk more about it later this week, but I want to make sure you have at least a vague understanding of how the project is going to be different, because it is slightly different from your 293 one. So any questions at this point, feel free to turn on your mic or post in the chat.
I don't have any about the syllabus, just about the projects, which you said.
Sure.
So yeah.
So do you have a question now, or do you want to wait until after I talk a little bit?
I can wait till after we talk a little bit.
Okay, because maybe I'll answer your question over the course of talking. Okay. So for the research project, a lot of things are going to be similar from what you did in 293, but the actual design of the study you create is a little bit different, a slightly more advanced research design. But I want to set you up to do a specific analysis. So we don't need to learn new analyses this semester. We're just going to apply a couple specific ones that you learned about in 293. The big difference here is that you are no longer doing a correlational study, you are designing an experiment. So if you remember in 293, I did talk a little bit about causal claims. So if you want to make a statement that one variable causes changes to the other, you can't just look at the correlation between them. Correlational research is very valuable to understand whether variables are associated, but if you want to more definitively state that one variable causes changes to the other, you would need to design what we call an experiment, whereby you take the variable that you think can cause change and you manipulate it. So say, for example, I think self-esteem causes people to be less anxious. I think if I boost someone's self-esteem, their anxiety will go down. How do I manipulate self-esteem? I can't just measure someone's self-esteem. I need to create a manipulation. And we'll be able to talk about manipulations. There's a way to create a manipulation for basically any variable you can think of. It's just a different sort of vein of creativity that you maybe didn't have to engage when you were doing your correlational survey, where you just found pre-published scales. A lot of variable manipulations do exist out there, though, and I would encourage you to try and find one. For example, there's really easy ways to boost somebody's sense of self-esteem by giving them some like bogus feedback. I often, in my experience in creating experimental manipulations, a really easy way is to ask people to reflect on a memory. So we do this a lot in the nostalgia research, right? You ask people like, hey, think about a nostalgic memory and write about it for 5 minutes, versus a control condition where you ask them to think about like an ordinary memory. That's the basic setup here. We're going to want to manipulate the variable with 2 conditions. And creating experimental manipulations is a little bit trickier than just using a pre-published scale. And so again, the research design in this project is a little bit more important and at the heart of what we're trying to do. So what you're going to want to start thinking about is, what variable do I think can cause changes to another? Your classic independent variable that you're going to manipulate, and the dependent variable that you will measure to see whether or not the IV caused changes. So that's going to set us up to do an ANOVA or a t-test for just the basic one-way analysis. Either one will work, but you want to be able to have a manipulation version of the variable that people are randomly assigned to at least 2 groups, enabling either ANOVA or a t-test. And then additionally, because we want to get real fancy, we're going to want to enable ourselves to do a 2x2 ANOVA, factorial ANOVA. Again, I know I mentioned factorial design in 293, so we'll be revisiting that concept later in the semester, but you can hopefully lean on what you learned in 293 to start thinking about what this means. So basically with a 2x2, you're looking at whether or not 2 IVs interact to shape outcomes for your DV. So is the relationship between self-esteem and anxiety different for men versus women? That's an easy one. So in terms of thinking about what am I actually going to do to get started on this project, just start thinking about that IV that you want to manipulate, That second IV can just be any of the demographics that you used in your old 293 survey, and what's the outcome that you think will be changed. So that's the basic difference between this project and your 293 project. From there, a lot of the steps are going to be the same. You're going to write a project proposal that I'll give you feedback on and let you know if I think it's in the right direction. After that, you're going to start putting together your survey materials, and then you're going to program in Qualtrics, which you all became experts at. Then you're going to collect data, then you're going to analyze it. So again, a lot of these steps are the same. It's just the design of the project will be a little bit different to flex a different sort of survey creation and research design muscle. So that's going to be one of the main differences between 293 and 294. For a lot of it, it's going to be similar, just with slightly more fun content and no math problems. Clap for that. I'm a fan of it. So at this point, if anyone has any questions on either the syllabus, the class, the project, anything you'd like to ask, I'm happy to field those questions at this time.
So like he kind of stated that it's similar to the project that we did in 293, but like it's just a little bit different. So like could we not like use our experiment 293, but like since it's similar, would we be able to like look at what we use and then try to come up with something else?
That's actually a fantastic idea, and I would actually encourage that. So if, for example, you did your project in 293 on the correlation between, let's use a common one, social media and self-esteem, right? In that survey, you just had people answer questions about their social media use and their self-esteem, correlation, boom, done. If you wanted to transform that into an experimental design, it's quite easy. You would ask yourself, do I think social media causes changes to self-esteem or vice versa? And then from there, you ask yourself, how do you manipulate that? You might think to yourself, oh, manipulating social media, that's got to be really tricky, right? I have to tell people to get on their Facebook or something. We're all about making things easier. If you come to me and ask about how to create a manipulation for social media, I'll tell you, have people reflect on a memory of the last time they were on social media versus a control topic, maybe the last time they sent a text message, like something that's similar but a slight control. Absolutely, if you want to recreate your same basic idea from your 293 project, just manipulate one of the variables, that's probably going to make your life a little bit easier, and I encourage that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else have any other questions? I think at this point I'm going to stop the recording. If anyone wants to hang out and ask any questions, I'll just stay in the Zoom until everyone else logs on.